So, I just saw Morbius, and it was just fine. Honestly, it's just a bad movie, but not in a good bad way, you know what I mean? Like, Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage were two really bad, goofy, and dumb films that does some buck wild stuff. But Morbius was just bland, and even for early 2000s superhero movie standards, really, really bad. But watching Morbius made me think of something I first thought about a few years back, when Venom was coming out and the Dark Universe concept was failing super hard. I thought the lineup for films that is now dubbed the Sony Spider-Man universe, which, side note, is really dumb sounding and a mouthful because there is technically no Spider-Man in this universe, is that they should do what the Dark Universe couldn't do. Make a semi-action horror series and have a shared universe. So, in full disclosure, this will be one of the few times I make a video SF with a speculative idea of what could have been. I just thought, A, this is a good thought experiment, and B, the big video I've been working on for months is kind of bigger than I originally planned. So I need time to vibe out and have some fun and not do a lot of sad stuff. So here's my hot take on how the SMU, Sony Marvel Universe, side note, I think their name is real long and real stupid, so I'm going to call it SMU from now on, should have taken from the failure of the Dark Universe. Before we go into this, we need to talk about the genesis of the concept of a marketable shared universe to make billions of dollars in a franchise. We need to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe again. I'm sorry, this is like the third time I've brought up Marvel in the past few months, but they really did change how we consume and view media, and it is extremely fascinating. Let me know if you want to actually see me do a deep dive on that, because it's been in the back of my head for a hot minute. Although Marvel isn't the first to use the connected universe idea for media, you have TV shows like Law & Order and their spin-offs, and to a degree Kevin Smith did it with his View Askew universe. Hell, we could make an argument that the first film-connected universe was the Universal monster movies of the 1940s. But the most common and well-known and most profitable cinematic universe is the juggernaut of the MCU. The MCU paved the way for things like the Monsterverse. Without them, we wouldn't have seen a giant monkey fight and lose multiple times to a radioactive lizard. They're the reason for the DC Extended Universe, which led us to the 4-hour-long Snyder Cut, which brought back hype for the DCEU, I suppose. That was until James Gunn said, "Hold my beer, homie," and killed it with the Suicide Squad. But while everyone was waiting in the background, there was one company waiting to unleash the best idea yet. Sony thought it would be cool to tease an entire Spider-Man expanded universe at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, which then crashed and burned after the failure of the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and really nobody talked about it until a little web-slinger decided to go into a certain billion-dollar franchise. With Spider-Man getting his own movie franchise within the MCU, the hype for the web-slinger gave Sony hope. But they were already planning to try to do a standalone Venom series in 2016 that wouldn't be connected to the Spider-Man series at all. The one thing that they didn't have at that moment was Spider-Man in their movie universe, because at the time, Mr. Parker was just being used for the MCU. I feel like giving you that brief history of the connected universe craze helps you understand the downfall of both SMU and the Dark Universe. Now, at the same time, we have Universal, who owns the rights to the Universal monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman. You know them, and as I said before, they were technically the OG of media-connected universes. To be fair, they made a Marvel-esque team-up movie before Marvel ever did a thing with Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing, which had the Wolfman, Dracula, Van Helsing, and Frankenstein all together in one film. By the way, my friend Xhoreya has a really good retrospective on it that is A1, and you should go check it out. The link is down below. They make really neat content. It may have technically been a critical failure at the time, but it made back almost double its budget, but they kind of just did nothing after that. I mean, we had the Wolfman, which I really loved, but it wasn't until a little thing known as the MCU sparked Universal to be like, so we have characters that are cool looking and can be awesome, let's make our own universe. Thus, the Dark Universe was created. They hyped their first movie, a remake of The Mummy with Tom Cruise, as the starting point of this new franchise. Technically, Dracula Untold had DNA of this idea, but nobody really saw that. I mean, I like it, but I have really shitty taste. Before The Mummy's premiere in June, that May they promoted and released the actual logo of the Dark Universe. Also casting Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man and Javier Bardem as Frankenstein. But when The Mummy bombed so hard that not even half a year after they promoted the Dark Universe, it was dead in the water. Like, bro, this image of the cast of the Dark Universe lives in my head rent-free. What makes this even worse is that you can tell these guys are not all in the same room and this picture is photoshopped. Like, holy shit, this was the funniest thing to me, that this universe failed so hard. And Vin Diesel tried to make a Valiant comic universe starting with Bloodshot. Like, imagine having the shittiest idea for a connected universe, that a Fast and the Furious universe makes more sense. And they're going through with that shit, it's absolutely happening. There is no way they're not gonna make Hobbs and Shaw 2, and hopefully that Bow Wow and Friends spin-off I've been wanting. But I digress. So after talking about these extended universes, I kind of see the problem, at least to me, each of these cinematic universes had. For Sony, without the use of Spider-Man, how are they going to make villain origin stories, and how are they going to make sense without Spider-Man? Venom being a perfect example. And for the Dark Universe, they lean too heavy on it being an action film with little to no horror left in them. It's already too late, but what if we merge those two problems together? Give the Sony Marvelverse a semi-horror twist to the characters. I mean, Sony has a ton of Spider-Man villains that could work as horror analog, like Slasher, who is a Spider-Man villain with a claw hand, or Skinhead, who is literally a racist skeleton man, or all the blood-themed Spider-Man villains. And we can't forget Big Wheel, the man whose weapon is a giant car with a big wheel. Fuck Morbius too. Give me that Big Wheel movie, Sony, you cowards! But for real, bro, the Marvel book characters that Sony owns are buck wild. But jokes aside, I think there are tons of analogs to classic movie monsters. I mean, the Lizard is a perfect analog to the Wolfman, a man who transforms into a horrendous beast out of random. And Morbius could have obviously been your Dracula analog, either trying to keep his vampirism in check or make him just extra with his vampire abilities. Chameleon could be your Invisible Man, but instead of being literally invisible, he's a master of disguise who loses himself in his parts. Venom works as the creature from the Black Lagoon analog. He's a defender of the California Bay Areas riddled with crime. Even using Hobgoblin would work well as an analog to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Hell, Flint Marko could be an analog to like the Golem. And then you have the two Van Helsing-like analogs, Mysterio and Kraven the Hunter. Mysterio is this wannabe occultist who believes these monsters exist and these mythical beings are out there trying to destroy the world, and is kind of like a ghost chaser, and Kraven the Hunter sees these monsters as an opportunity to hunt them down for sport. And then you would have their Wheelman, who would be no other than Big Wheel, played by Ryan Gosling, getting a 3-movie trilogy deal. Bro, I just really want that Big Wheel movie. So the reason why I'm turning the Marvel characters into horror analogs and not turning the horror analogs into superheroes, because I don't think turning horror monsters into action heroes really work that well, is because action is overdone in these things. Where I think it works better to turn comic book characters into horror-like beings is because you can add a sense of sadness or unseen nuance. I mean, look at certain runs like in Swamp Thing and Animal Man that turn these otherwise goofy looking characters and can look into an internal view and see their flaws through horror. The Lizard isn't technically a mindless monster, but a genius scientist stuck in a monster's body. You can have him reflect on the idea of human nature versus animal instinct. Morbius can question his own humanity as he realizes he has to kill to stay alive, but does he really want to stay alive? And then you have Venom. And you know what? Just keep Venom the way he is. Just make him a little extra, make him maybe gayer, and then you're good. You never really think about the actual pain and terror these characters must feel or go through all the time. Eddie Brock is bonded with an alien entity that feeds off of his own life force. Dr. Kurt Connors turns into a terrifying lizard monster, and the toll it takes on his body to literally grow new limbs and then losing them after reverting back must suck. Sandman is trying to become more human and empathetic after turning into a hulking sand-like monster. The Goblin's battle with his self-identity. And then Kraven is just being foreign with a bad mustache. But now we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Would this horror-oriented Marvel Cinematic Universe series be rated R? I will say yes and no. I think a good horror and good action can be done without going over the top. I think that the Beast transformation scene in X-Men First Class is a lot more visually terrifying than the Wolfman transformation in The Wolfman. But I am a big fan of horror, letting your mind wander to what you hear and not see. There is a scene in the new Batman that does this perfectly with rats. I think that you can make horror films, even monster films, without it being R-rated. Things like Cloverfield, A Quiet Place, and The Ring are all horror movies that use atmosphere to make you feel fear. But if I can be honest with you, I would love to have this fictional Sony Marvel horrorverse be rated R. I want them to be creepy and slocky, bloody good times. Watching Morbius and Venom, seeing them mow down a bunch of people, doesn't feel like they pay off. All the Sony Marvel movies fight scenes are super lame and they don't feel real. But I think what would elevate these fight scenes would be blood and limbs flying, and the carnage in the wake of these monsters would be super insane. But also, there's proof you can do good R-rated superhero movies without going over the top. James Gunn is a master at that. I mean, look at Slither and the Starro Lab scene in Suicide Squad. He knows how to make body horror uncomfortable. And I live for that shit. Each film can get their own solo film, and Mysterio and Kraven in the background of them, each hunting them or recruiting them. And when the team up with the possible Sinister Six movie would be these monsters either going against each other or working together to stop Kraven or an even bigger bad. But this is all hypothetical. I know that this video essay is written like a wannabe speculative fanfiction, and I'm not a movie screenplay writer or a producer or anything like that. But I am a dorky cinema nerd, and I just wanted to do a writing exercise because I thought about what could have been cool and make Sony shine through the bogged down market of both superheroes and connected universes. But there is a bright side. With the success of The Invisible Man by Universal being a horror movie that came out in 2020, it brought life back to the dark universe, but to make them more horror comedy, and the first being Reinhold with Nicolas Cage's Dracula. It gives me hope that maybe we could have a connected universe that doesn't feel all the same. But with the Sony universe, how they're using the ending of No Way Home and just No Way Home in general, it kind of makes it feel like it's a blander version of the MCU, and I don't know how they're going to get out of that. Hey, thanks guys for watching. I know this is a weird video, but I've been working on a bigger project and it started to get heavy and I needed to take my mind off of it for a bit, so I hope you enjoyed this weird video. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see more of my hot takes, follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you think this is good, or if you think it's bad, share it and be like, look at this idiot. But if you haven't heard it today, you are loved, you are cared for, and whatever you're going through, you've got this, cowboy.